Hello and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks. Today I've got a new look for the show. These are my old record shelves back in LA. This was about about a quarter of my collection. The rest were in storage. They are all now in storage and fully vaccinated and waiting to come visit me in Canada, and I can't wait. So speaking of Canada, this particular show is going to be a Canadian tag. I was challenged or invited by Jamie Cottle to answer 20 questions about Canadian bands and artists and records and this and that. And it's coming up right after this. Uh, 100 years it took us to come up with that great little ditty. We're going to get to the questions now. Number one is show a Canadian country album. Well, I've got to go with Smiley Bates. Smiley played sad songs. I ran into him once in a music shop in Ajax, and he said I could send him some songs. So my partner and I wrote 17 songs in one day and recorded them on a little old cassette. This was a long time ago. And he said they had to be sad, and they were truly sad. And they were even sadder because Smiley did not choose to record any of them. Next is a show a Canadian jazz album. Well, I'm going to go with this one. Picked it up in a Goodwill store. This is Trump Davidson. He was a jazz musician, I think, out of Sudbury. And this is a Dixieland album. You wouldn't think you'd find a lot of Dixieland jazz in Sudbury, but apparently now you know, thanks to this tag, that it's there. Number three is show a Canadian artist in an American band. Well, I'm going to choose Rhinoceros. This was going to be a supergroup for Elektra Records. Never panned out. They did 3 albums. This was the first. And the keyboard player was Mike Fonfara, who has played with everybody, including Lou Reed. He was the co-writer of Growing Up in Public, all the songs on that album, which is a terrific album, by the way. Sadly, he passed away, I think, late last year. But Rhinoceros, Mike Fonfara, Canadian, working into an American band. Next, we're going to go with a show a Canadian female solo artist. Well, this is a solo artist, I suppose. This is Michael Jordana and the Poles. She has the Poles, but she is Michael Jordana, and that is above the thing. So I'm going to say she's a solo artist, even though she had the Poles. Famous for CN Tower, great little song, and went on to be a quite a very successful artist in Canada. And my band used to warm up for her back in the day at Larry's Hideaway and a number of other clubs. Okay, we're going to move on now to show a Canadian metal album. Okay, this is one by White Wolf. This is a band out of the Midwest, and it is Endangered Species. I listened to this today, and it is indeed a metal album. Okay, now we're going to go to, this is going to be tricky here. This is going to showing these things. We're going to Canadian Artist 45. I'm going to cheat and do a few here. This one is, let's see what we can find it here. It's upside down. There we go. Could have Been a Lady by April Wine. You can't get much more Canadian and cool than that. Bob Segarini, this was a single he put out between the Dudes and when he did Gotta Have Pop, which is coming up later, by the way. Just a little tease. And I've got a couple of picture sleeves here. This one is by the Jitters. And to mix it up a little, this one is by the Jitters. Next, we are going to a French-Canadian artist. This is one of my favorite Canadian artists, and I have his first three albums and adore them. This is Louis Furet, and The Sky is Falling. If you have a chance to pick up one of his albums, they're not expensive. They are wonderful, kind of cabaret rock, but he's my out of Montreal and married a French-Canadian last name, Carol Lore, who was hot, hot, hot. Okay, now we're going to go with show a Canadian Indigenous artist. This one I totally failed on. All I could come up with was what everybody else is going to come up with. It was either Buffy St. Marie or Robbie Robertson. I have Robbie Robertson. My Buffy St. Marie's are back in LA. Okay, now we're going to do show a Canadian prog rock album. I have a real weakness for Quebec prog rock, and one of the bands I've been picking up is Garolou. This is one of their albums here. And son of a gun if I don't have another Garolou album here. There are a ton of Canadian prog rock bands that are terrific from Quebec, and it's certainly a genre that is well worth checking out. The next album on my list is a Canadian album, a Canadian pressed album. Now, this doesn't have that little thing that everybody's showing, that little Canadian maple leaf on it, but this, I checked it out. This is the Brecker Brothers back-to-back. This was actually pressed and distributed from Mississauga. So you can't get much more Canadian than Mississauga. I've been there myself. There are plenty of Canadians around. Okay, name. Let's go on to the next one. Show Canadian folk album. I'm going to do, staying in the French-Canadian kind of vibe. This is La Rive de Diable, derrière et derrière. Just listen to this today. An unfortunate cover, I think. I think if they had this to do over, they probably would. But not that there's anything wrong with four men, hairy men sleeping in a bed together, but not how I'd choose to spend a Saturday night. Okay, now the next one, and I wanted to keep this because a lot of people have been showing albums with snow. Obviously, Canada has a lot of snow. But I wanted to try and get it as a Canadian album. So I came up with this one. You can see the snow here and everybody's hair. This is Kensington Market Avenue Road. Now, the interesting thing about this album, because we did an interview with Keith Mackay on my channel, who is the chief songwriter for the band. When this was released, this is Canadian pressing. When it was released in the United States, they put a big border around this to hide the snow because they thought it would be off-putting to an American audience. Now, most of America gets snow. I have no idea why, but yes, if you buy this, and I do have an American version of this album, and there's a gigantic frame, a red frame on there to try and hide as much of that cold, wet precipitation as possible. So the next challenge is to show a Canadian male solo artist, and I'm going to go with a friend of mine and a person who's been on interviewed on our show and will be interviewed again, Bob Bryden. Obviously, a lot of Psych fans will know him from Rain Ghost and Christmas. This was a solo album from the, I believe, the early 80s. And the last album I've actually purchased is his brand new album. And I have not even managed to listen to this yet because my daughter is staying with us at the moment. She's down in my record room and I don't have access to my record player. But as soon as I do, I will be putting this on, Love in the Atomic Age. Double album. I'm dying to hear this from Bob Bryden, a terrific Canadian solo artist. Okay, now next is show a song or album with a Canadian location in the name, the title, or lyric. Well, I'm starting with this one. It's a tiny bit of a cheat, Banff, because Banff is spelled wrong, but Banff is certainly a Canadian location. I'm going to go with the Blue Canadian Rockies. This is great. This is on the ARC label, which will be coming up slightly later. And speaking of Toronto, Cabbagetown. all Canadian locations. So I covered the waterfront there with Canadian locations. Okay, now we're going to go with show an album with a Canadian symbol on it, a moose, a duck, a leaf, or whatever. Well, I've got this, and this has got several. Not only is it our home and native land and mainland Canada there, it has a red maple leaf right on her buttocks, and there is a little beaver down here, should you need any more Canadian. So this has a number, I tell you, of Canadian symbols. What are we doing next? Okay, I'm going to be doing name a Canadian record label. Okay, well, I've got two. I'm going to start with what I just said, the ARC label. This was mostly Canadian country acts as this is probably or Maritimian stuff like this, but they did get into a little psych with a side project. I think it was Paragon was one of their things, and I'm going to go with these this album and it's slightly here. I'm not sure you can see it with the thing, Duke Records, which was owned by the owner of Manta Sound. And they put out any number of albums, including a string of Jane Siberry albums. Duke Street, I don't believe, is still in business, but neither is, I believe, Manta Sound at this moment. Okay, now show a live album or an album recorded live in Toronto. This is a slight sheet. I don't like live albums very much. I have a few, and I have a few Canadian ones, but they're in LA. I have Lighthouse Live, I have Perth County Conspiracy Live, but I'm just not overflowing with live albums. But I do have this. This is Scott Folsom. And the reason this is a cheat is one side is studio recordings, and the other side is recorded live in a club in somewhere in the Maritimes. So there you go. So next is show a song with beer or whiskey in the lyrics. Nothing is more Canadian than alcoholism. So I went with Murray McLaughlin, Sweeping the Spotlight Away. And I'm going to have to pull this out here and find the actual song. I believe it's Next in Line, perhaps. I'm not even sure. I should have looked this up. It's on this album though, and I have the lyric. The lyric is, I asked him where his daddy was. His thumb jerked past his ear. He's over in the hotel, drowning himself in beer. So there, I came up with it, even though I can't remember which exact song it is, but it is on that album for sure. Okay, I'm going to go with the last one here. Number 19 on this is a Canadian album or artist on colored vinyl. Well, I'm going to go with one of the early colored vinyl rock and roll albums was Bob Segarini. And this is a pink splatter. And apparently Bob said, this is, of course, Gotta Have Pop. And Bob said that he went into the actual pressing plant and would throw the vinyl blobs onto the pressing machine and create some of these. So you could have an actual, I have this signed, by the way, over here. You could have an actual pressing of this where the splatter on there was created by Bob Segarini himself. Think of that. Not an expensive album, but a great album. I would get this absolutely. Question 20 is to hand this over to another Canadian BC channel. And my choice is Dots and Loops, a great channel. And if there's anybody who can handle this in a mature way, far better than me, it's Dots and Loops. So take it away, Dots. Take it away, Loops. Dying to see what you come up with on these 20 questions.